Welcome to another episode of An Intimate Conversation with Women of Color. I am your host, Deneen L. Garrett, and today's guest was actually recommended by a previous guest, Jennifer Witter. Jennifer is the CEO and founder of the Borland Group, Inc., and her episode is Under My Own Terms. So check it out. And I believe that today's guest is going to get into a little bit of that as well, because she and I were just talking about her background, what she does in addition to what I know about. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. So today's guest is Dr. Joynicole Martinez. She is the CEO of the Alchemist Agency. Dr. Martinez has over 20 years of experience providing capacity building services, including strategic planning and organizational design, with a focus on leadership and executive training and coaching, performance and change management, fund development, and impact measurement. Dr. J, tell us more about you.
Oh, that's such a smart, it makes me sound so brilliant. I'm like, yes, who is that? She is on fire. Oh, I'm so incredibly pleased to be here. I'm so honored. Thank you for the invitation. Oh. And Jennifer, when you listen, thank you for the recommendation or referral, because this is I listened and totally stalked you. And that's what we're supposed to do, right? And on top of that, I thought how critical and how timely for a woman to say, we need to elevate our own voices, right? This isn't about someone else making room for me. I'm going to make room. I'm going to make space. And so thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about our conversation today.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to make space. That's right. Because we can't wait on anybody else, right? Mm-hmm. Those days are over. So if it's not us, then who? All right. So you told us a little bit about yourself, and I, shared your background, but also we were talking, and you mentioned being in the health field. So tell us a little bit about that before we jump into today's conversation.
So it's odd to say this in the context of a global pandemic, but I'm an epidemiologist. Hey. That's yes. And so it's so funny when I say it now, it feels so much heavier than it did, let's say in 2016, right? Which is an honor and a privilege. But, the amazing thing is epidemiology truly is about detecting patterns in disease and lack of patterns in health, right? So they will say you're a disease detective. But the truth is, it's such a wonderful time to be in this field because we're talking about how something as critically but tiny, right? Something critically important but extraordinarily small affects not just our population, not just our culture, but how it affects bodies differently. Mm-hmm. And so my medical background now, it opens doors to conversations that we should have had, 10, 15 years ago, because there's this kind of punch in your face in 2020 to 2021 that says, if you're an epidemiologist, right, I will be heard and you won't deny what I'm saying.
Right.
So, yeah.
Wow. You know what? That's amazing. So I like that, a disease detective, because you know what we're talking about today in your background, in addition, you're like a disease detective in that field as well, right? The work you're doing in organizations and corporations and with executives, it's like you're detecting something and to be able to help them make a change, if you will. So first of all, thank you so much for the work that you're doing in EPA.
You got it. We know what you're saying.
Right. Okay. And I will say and share that I am fully vaccinated. So I'm not trying to, wasn't trying to let anything stop me from doing what I love to do, which is move, get around, go outdoors, concerts, travel, be around people, all of that. So again, I thank you so much for your work. And so with that work, as well as the work that you do in addition, family and all of that, other than to inform and educate, which you get joy from doing, why is it important for Black women to have a platform to use our voices?
So there's this phrase that we use in medicine. We say things like traditionally underserved, right? I like to change that and say traditionally or historically excluded.
Okay.
We've not been underserved, right? We've been excluded from the service altogether. When you consider not just health, but when you look at the population and its wellness factor, meaning all the social determinants of health, how we deal with our physical health, our mental health, our housing strength and stability and security. When you look at all of those things, right, where you see there's been a traditionally excluded voice, it's been the voice of Black women, right? There's an interesting statistic that says when a woman of color starts a business, 80% of every of her dollars goes back to her family and community. 80%. So 80 cents of every dollar she makes, she reinvests into her family and her community. For the traditional white cis male, that's 30. So while I'm giving 80 cents back on the dollar, he's giving back 30 cents on the dollar. But my voice has been the one that's been traditionally excluded from the conversation. So I've had the greatest impact fiscally, but the lowest impact verbally.
Wow. Now
right?
That's deep.
You see, so this platform elevating voices of women who are actually investing, right? We talk about, oh, this grant or this program, this loan. But the truth is, our culture, our community, our gender has been elevated and has been strategically, and I do mean strategically, sustained by women always.
Yes.
And now it's time to say that. It's time to openly exclaim, you've not been my savior, we've saved ourselves.
And we saw that in 2020, right?
Yes, we did.
And that wasn't the first time, but we definitely saw it. You know what I would say? It would probably be the first time there was a captive audience seeing it, right? So 2020 through November, and beyond, we saw that. And people, wow, okay, look at them. Look at what they're doing. They wanted to hear our voices. They wanted to hear from us. And I feel that we're kind of going back into where they want to, other people want to put us back in a box. And so we have to continue to use our voices. We have to continue to not be boxed in. So again, I appreciate everything you're doing. And the more you talk, is more that I'm learning about you, of course, right? Because this is our first time connecting, but revealing so much and just hearing from you the impact that you're having in so many different spaces. So I love that. I absolutely do. So your consulting firm is focused on building the capacity of purpose-driven organizations, corporations, and executives. How specifically are you using your voice for Black women?
Oh, so people say capacity building, such a generic kind of rote term, right? But it's hard to capture in one sense. Okay, so if you need funding, how do we find that? How do we connect you to that? If you need a platform, how do we connect you to that? If what you require is better access to talent, right? So there's this thing that we do in our community. We fall into one or two groups where we're elevating one another, as in we consider ourselves in the same boat, and when we all rise, we are rising. Or we consider ourselves in different boats on the same river, and if I'm rising, you must fall, and you must fail, and you must drown. And we kind of box ourselves into these different spaces. What I hope is that by consulting with companies owned by Black women, run by Black women, run by white males, run by, color, creed, ethnicity matters not. What I'm hoping to do always is to build the capacity to bring diversity of thought and diversity of expertise and experience into a realm so that the realm is richer. And again, I said earlier, women of color tend to invest 80% of each dollar. So imagine bringing that person in and you're over CSR for your organization, right? You're over DEI for your organization. You're developing a system of belonging and inclusion for your organization. When you elevate and you center on the voices of women of color in your organization, what you do is you elevate your ability, your capacity right? Your capacity to earn. Because there's a direct connect between diversity of thought and experience to the bottom line, whether you're a not or for-profit organization. That's a direct link. So what I aim to do is to bring that kind of flair, that flavor, that extraordinary experience, that connection to something eternal, that connection to something innate, that kind of ancestral wisdom that tends to resonate with women in general, women of color specifically, and bring that diversity of thought into a place and say, it doesn't matter if you're looking to gain or build capacity fiscally or emotionally, if you're looking to cross-train your team, or you're looking to evaluate whether or not there is a sense of belonging and inclusion in your organization. There is a innate nature that has been traditionally excluded from this algorithm or equation. And when we add it back, we see businesses succeeding and thriving. We see job retention moving forward, right? And we see belonging indices growing and expanding, and people feeling as though they're connected to the mission and the purpose in a way you don't see when you lack that diversity.
Yeah. And you know what? So listening to everything you're saying, read about it, heard about it, hands down, people say businesses do better when you have a diverse workforce, the people in there bringing their different perspectives and experiences. And then listening to the stats that you just shared, I'm just thinking still, those businesses are still succeeding, right? They're already succeeding. Mm-hmm. They're the ones systematically, they've been the leaders, right? The foundation. So really, what is the impact for them to diversify, if you will?
Moving to extraordinary. So it's funny you asked that, because someone said to me, well, we're a Fortune 100 company.
Right.
We're not doing poorly.
Right.
But when you consider finance, let's just stay money centric for a minute, mm-hmm. right? Because we don't tend to do that sometimes. But let's just talk mm-hmm. about the cash for a minute.
Right.
How different is it as an experience, not just for your customers, but for your employees when their 401k shoots from being worth, I don't know, their 62 unvested stocks go from being worth $100 to $250. How more likely are they to stay in their role until all of their stock vests? I mean, just for a moment, consider that. How likely are you to stay until that last drop is yours?
Yeah.
It's the extraordinary part. See, at this point, there are so many businesses doing what we would consider well, but mm-hmm. that baseline has moved. That baseline has shifted. It's changed. Now, the index for, the Fortune 10, 150, those are not the same indices there were in 1985 or 1995. And Lord knows, not in 2000.
Yeah.
Right? When we talk about companies being worth trillions of dollars, that was unheard of. I mean, who could imagine I think I got my first Apple IIe, and I'm going to tell my age right here. My first Apple IIe when I was like in 3rd or 4th grade. There was no suspicion or expectation that if I had kept it, right, then now it would be worth some obscene amount of money, or that if I had invested at that point in something that was largely expected to fail and was experimental, that I would be a multi-millionaire today. So that's what happens. We think, oh, is it on trend? Well, I'm already doing okay. But is doing okay your goal? Is that your aim? Is that where you feel sufficient? Is it sufficient for us to be able to make payroll? Or is it sufficient for us to be able to give bonuses and raises, right? Because we want people to feel connected to this mission, and not just connected to it, but compensated by their contribution to it. So that change, there's a thing I say all the time to my children. The energy you feel is the difference between where you are and the change you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
Right. So that energy, that diversity is that energy. It says, oh, you're okay here. you're doing okay. But that expectation, that place that says that goes beyond even what I can think, that goal is beyond what I even at this point today, 20 years ago, right, could imagine. I can't even imagine. That's the difference. That's where that little bit of effort to bring into your sphere of influence this amazing experience and expertise, this different voice, this centering, this extraordinary gift brings you from good to great.
Yeah. And, and I think the other thing too is what worked before is not going to work tomorrow.
That's right.
Right. So the companies who, we were doing well and this, that, and the other, okay, your business plan that worked before is not going to sustain you, and it's not going to, get you to extraordinary. It's not even going to, you're probably not even going to be around to even be good much longer if you don't pivot, if you don't bring in other people. Because nowadays, the younger groups, the millennials, the Gen Z, they're not looking to go to a place just to collect a check.
That's right.
That's not even enough anymore. It's
They're looking for
everything that you said. Absolutely. It's like, what are you doing for the environment? What are you doing for people, for community? All of that they're expecting, and they have no problem with leaving. They will hop and move on to the next thing. And what 2020 has also showed us is that right now people are begging for employees.
Yes.
They're begging. Who would have ever thought that a McDonald's would be closed? Ever in your lifetime?
No, never.
I rode to one of the McDonald's in my neighborhood and they were closed. Never. Who would have thought it, right? And so you're seeing a lot of that, and businesses are dying, and they're not sustaining, right? Because in these businesses I'm talking about, they're not necessarily because of the diversity and that they didn't. Right. It wasn't that. It was just that they don't have the employees because people were like, no, for various reasons, right?
Someplace else.
Yeah. Or I don't have to do anything right now because we're in the middle of a pandemic. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it's not enough just to expect people to show up for a check. You need to do more, and you need to show them that you're invested in them and you care about them and the things they care about. I was on a call earlier today, and our leader, she kept saying, like, we're talking about the business, but then also recognizing what all we have going on outside of, right? So recognizing that, those days of when you just walked into the workplace is like you left that behind. Those days have been over, you know what I'm saying? But she actually made a point to say, we're doing this. You have accomplished these things also while navigating everything else.
Everything else.
So much. Oh my God. Yes. So, I'm sure you come across women who don't recognize the power of their voices. And the way that I define your voice is however you express yourself. So if it's written, if it's song, if it's dance, however you express yourself is what I mean by using your voice. So what do you tell women through your consulting, training, speaking to help them recognize the power of their voices, as well as what are you telling your 5 young children?
So to the women, we have this exercise, and, historically, there's this connection between women of color, and I do mean of color, all different and music and movement. And there's just this connection, right? There's this kind of feeling, this comfort that comes when you hear something that stirs your soul.
Yes.
So we've been in this exercise for a while with one of my clients, and all of our sessions on executive presence begin with movement. And you might say, why would you execute? No, we have to be in our most, IBM selves, right? We have to be in our suits and tie. Like, do not. But the truth is, owning your voice has less to do with how you express it, but that you express it. There's a release that happens. And if you watch women move, when they find, it's really incredible. Just a small movement. We do this exercise called finding your tail. And I tell these women, find your tail. If you feel like a lion, what does a lion's tail move like? Do you feel like a rabbit? Do you feel like a giraffe, right? Your voice comes from that feeling, that kind of part where you identify your strength, your kind of flair, your connection to movement. And the glory, and I do mean that, the glory of that, right, is that when a woman finds her voice, she doesn't just find this, her throat.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't just find her words. She finds her strength. She finds her connection to her being, her movement, her statue. She finds her connection to her skin. She finds her connection to her body. She finds her connection to her glory. And so whether she's in the boardroom, the bedroom, she's in her motherhood or her partnership, she finds a way of expressing herself that suits her in a very particular and specific way. And when that happens, it's unique that women empower through their nurturing selves. They empower others. So in finding her voice, she empowers everyone else around her to find their voices. So we often celebrate, oh, find your voice, take your space. The glory of that is when I find my glory, my sister finds her glory. Yeah. When I find my voice, when I begin to exercise my being, when I get to exert my energy, when I begin to say, this is exactly all 360 degrees of my personal being, everyone around me, whether they identify as male or female or neither, there's something that rises in everyone around her. It elevates because there's this exertion of energy that happens in her voice. So if you've ever heard Maya Angelou or Gwendolyn Brooks in person, there's this energy that empowers. It's the same energy that empowers if you've heard Mahalia Jackson sing or Mary J. Blige, or you've seen, right? There's no difference in this elevation that happens. There's no difference that happens if you've heard Jackie McCullough preach, or right? There's this elevation, this energy that says, I feel empowered to affect my sphere. So it's not just about her finding her voice, right? It's about finding a way to release that thing that's pent up, to release that innate energy, to release that thing that's inside, so that everyone around you, male, female, young or old, is elevated. This is why women have been at the center of recovery, whether it's economic, post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, whether it's social entrepreneurship. This is why women have been at the center. When it's been successful, it isn't just because they find their voice, it's because when they do, much like that 80-30 rule or that reinvestment into their community, their voice elevates everyone within its hearing. And that's why it's so imperative that we say, open it up. If it's writing, singing, whatever it is, if it's styling the other women around you so they are impeccably presented to the earth, whatever it is, find it and exert it. Because when you rise, we all rise.
Yes, yes. And I love this the glory of that. I love that. In the
Isn't it
connecting.
Glory?
Yes. I love that. That's going to be the title, most likely. That's going to be the title of this particular episode, because I like that resonates with me. And, everything that you're saying, and thinking about the music and thinking about the songs that, if I turn on the radio or and my song comes on, what that does for me. Yes. And what it does for my day, to hear my favorite artists singing my favorite song. It's like, oh, my day is good.
Better.
My day is on. And, from this point on, it's a good feeling. It makes you feel so good inside. And, immediately, coming alive. I'm like, hey, whatever happens that day, you're good. And
it moves us right from this transaction to translation.
Right.
And I keep telling my children, and I we have this, maybe it's some odd thing we do in our home with after dinner, we turn the music on and we just have like music and dance time in our house. And I just if you want to move, you want to cry, you want to roll or break dance or pop or whatever it is you're feeling, do that, because that connection to just the thing that moves you. See, we consider the voice something that is static, but it's fluid. And in so many, here's the thing, trauma informs, right? So trauma informs. And what I think we sometimes miss is there's a reason why people say, oh, they got so much soul.
Yeah.
But if soul is a combination of our mind, our will, and our emotion, then the trauma that has occurred against our mind, the trauma that's occurred against our will, the trauma that's occurred against our emotion informs that soul. And so when that soul connects not just to a thing, a song, a poem, a photo, an image, right, but each other, that's why that energy elevates. Because I can walk into a room and see my sister, have never seen her a day in my life, don't know her name, but something in my soul connects to her. Right? Something about my being connects to her. And the moment I start feeling myself, she starts feeling herself. We've all seen it happen. Even in gentlemen, right? You see the nod that says, right. I see you, bro.
I see you, yeah.
I see you. Right? We don't have to have words. That's that unspoken language that connects us. That's that voice. And how we experience it and how we express it, we have to unleash. It's been tied up so long. And I hope and I aim and I truly do pray that I'm allowing my children time and space to unleash it in a way that suits them, so that I am saying to them, I see you.
Yeah.
Because that's what we've missed. I see you. I got you. Do you, girl? Right? And then I'm not angry at it. I'm not envious of it. I just go, yes. That's my yes. Yes.
So would you say that connecting and the movement and the music is like that one thing that you would recommend to anyone listening, so that we are able to first connect with ourselves and then able to see one another?
Yes.
Would that be your recommendation?
There's nothing more universal. So imagine prayer has a rhythm. Poetry has a rhythm. Our voices have a rhythm. Language has a rhythm. Our patterns in our clothing, the style that we wear, the way we tie our shoes, whether we want fat or skinny shoelaces, whether we want skinny or wide bottom pants, right? There's a rhythm to how we walk in it. Whether we're wearing a stiletto has a rhythm. There's this rhythm. And when you find that rhythm, that's what connects us. Yeah. We recognize the rhythm. And it may seem, that sounds so spacey. I'm a scientist. Listen, I recognize rhythm. I recognize patterns. And there's a rhythm and a pattern to that elevation that happens, to that freedom. I tell my children, freedom has a sound. You hear it, right? You hear the sound of freedom in the yell, in the scream, in the expressions of joy, you even hear all summer. In 2020, we heard sounds of freedom. Yeah. We heard the sound of freedom that's been bound up, and we heard the sound of freedom that had been unleashed, right? Those patterns, those rhythms, when you find them in yourself. And it's unique for every person.
Yes.
It's you, right? I mean, I have 2 girls and 3 boys. They all express themselves in different ways, very different. But there's this thread in each of them that I recognize in my mother and father, and my grandparents, and my great-grandparents, who I had the great honor and privilege of having in my life until I was an adult. There's this familiarity that shows up.
Yes.
In my cousins, right? And my aunts and uncles. So there's this rhythm to freedom. There's this rhythm to it that we don't always recognize. And that same rhythm shows up in business. And sometimes we don't see that. But the rhythm of business really speaks to how free we are to conduct business. So now in leadership, we say, I have to have a rhythm of business meeting to see how things are progressing. You can tell the companies that are in their rhythm, right? Isn't that what they've hit their stride.
Yeah.
They found their place. They've identified their niche. There's a customer experience that goes along with it. It feels very natural.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what we're looking for. And that's why diversity, and that's why the voice of the woman, and that's why the voice of the woman of color, and that's why the Black voice, the Black female voice, that Madonna woman, that's why it's a business imperative.
Absolutely. And so, you know what? I don't know. I don't know what your title. It has gone from the glory of that to recognize the rhythm. So, honey, I'm going to have to ponder this, when we actually finish, because you might drop some more gems. But, so thinking about this next question, I'm just wondering, with everything that you're doing, everything that you have going on, I'm really interested in how you respond to this. But in memory of my sister, author and poet Soul True, she wrote a book, Dreams Deferred. And that book led me to start thinking about any dream I deferred, and then to want to encourage others to think about any dreams they deferred or delayed and to do something about it. So please share if you've ever had a dream deferred and what action you took.
So I say this, I believe in extraordinary timing. Mm-hmm. This was an extraordinarily timed conversation. Literally, before I saw your message, I was writing about the grief associated with dreams deferred.
Wow.
And we have not culturally considered that a grieving process. We don't consider it a death, right? We say, oh, well, that was her dream, and now she's done so and so and so. There's a loss, just in full vulnerability right here. And I really considered, is this okay to say here? But I have 5 amazing children. I lost 2 along the way. Never had a pregnancy until I was in my mid-30s. My first pregnancy, I was a advanced maternal age mother, right? So they mark on your, she old, y'all. She high risk, y'all.
Another word.
She old. Right. So there's this dream that happens when we're pregnant, right? There's this really incredible, you can see them, you feel them, you smell them. That's how dreams are for us. And when I say dream, I mean something that you've spent some time kind of contemplating and considering. We can almost feel it, right? We've imagined ourselves in it. We've walked through it. We've visualized it. We've considered what it would feel like and smell like and what we would do when we get there. And so the loss of it, when we encounter a stop, that deferral that says, there's a grief process we have to walk through. Mm-hmm. And we don't always consider that. We're expected, because we are such resilient people, and we're expected to just move on to the next dream, right? As though I didn't lose anything.
Yeah, keep it moving.
And I really, when I was reading your note, I said, wow, that's just extraordinary timing. Because I would say, dreams deferred, allow yourself time to grieve it. Allow yourself time to really identify, just like any other process, what makes you angry, what makes you sad, what makes you hurt, what part of it do you still long for? Because deferral is not the same thing as denial.
Yeah.
Right? It's a deferral. If it's deferred, the part of it that really engaged you, that really gave you passion, you can find that other places. That's what I did. So my deferred dream, so I had my first child, and then we had a loss, and there's this dream deferred. And I remember I went to my husband and I said, I don't ever want to get pregnant again. I'm just done. Just hating. And he went, he gave me a little while to kind of get myself together. And I remember I went back and said, I don't want that to be my last experience with pregnancy. I don't want my final word in my body to be a loss. It bothered me that would be the thing that would, in my head, right, in my emotions, define how I related to my body and my person. And it's the same thing in work. I've been in business now for 21 years. Wasn't my first iteration. right? The first one, oh, it was horrifying. Just, ooh, horrible. But again, I had to keep coming back to it to really pin down what about it was driving me. So when the dream is deferred, you have to kind of shatter through the grief process. You have to go through it, walk through it. You cannot ignore the process. Right. Whether it takes you 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, you cannot ignore that. But when you pin down the part of it that made you feel impassioned, you can find that in other places, because a deferral is not a denial. It just means the framework, right? The part of it, the kind of, and I mean frivolity in the best way, the parts of it that our imagination added to the truth of it, we can reroute that. We can rearrange that, right? But the truth of it, the factual part of it, the part of it that we really are impassioned by, that's the thing we don't want to lose. So when you get rid of all the imagination of it and you get down to the truth and fact of it, that's the process that takes you from grief to health, right? When you say, so for example, I lost this person, but the healthy part of it is I can acknowledge that it was a person, that I missed that person, that they had an impact and influence on my life. And when we start to remember those good times, that's what we narrow it down to. Remember the good times, right? That's the truth and the fact of it. So if you get past the imagination of it, the part that makes you feel emotionally responsive, and you get down to the kind of nitty gritty that impassions you and reminds you of the truth and the fact that ultimately this is my body and it was going to be able again to produce, or ultimately I still am going to be able to finish school. It may not look the way I expected, but the truth of the matter is there are other places to go, or ultimately there are other business to start, or ultimately there are other roles to take on where I can still be adept and I can still exert my voice in the workplace. When you get to the truth of it and you shed yourself of the parts that are just us and our imaginations building an image, right? When we get to the meat of it all, you can get past the deferral.
Yeah.
You can get back down to business.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, and sorry for your losses.
It delivered to me. Yeah. And so thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So we've already been talking about wealth in a sense, right? A piece of it with the Black women bringing home 80% or 80 cents on a dollar. So what is your view on wealth and the importance of generational wealth?
I feel like we need a whole nother episode.
That's a whole nother section. Look, if we need a part 2, then we'll have a part 2.
Listen, I'm like, we could do this, right? Just this right here. So we've been talking all this time about this very innate part of femininity, this innate part of culture and color, and this beautiful kind of ancestral language and tone and rhythm, right? On my wall in my office, it says, money answers all things. People say, why would you put that on your wall? Okay, well, here's the thing. I live in a culture where if your question is, how do we close the gap in education? Money. Mm-hmm. Listen, I can give you a curriculum. If I can't produce the resources to get that curriculum into the hands of the children that need it.
Right.
Money.
Right.
Now, wealth takes on many different identities. We understand this, right? It's not all our capital finance. It's not all the $1. But we talk about generational wealth building. Mm-hmm. We are talking about being able to leave a legacy for my children's children, right? I have a responsibility to care for my children. The greater responsibility is to care for my great-great-grandchildren and to leave something so that when they are knocking at opportunity's door, they don't run into the same obstacles that I have had. So we talk about wealth building, and so many people narrow it down to just, okay, well, I have to have my IRA, my 401k, I got to pay the school debt, I can't let them get into school loans, but it's so much more than that. Mm-hmm. Wealth building, when you look at our counterparts, especially here in the States, right? You're talking about access and opportunity.
Right.
So we go way back to the first question, why do we have to elevate voices? Access and opportunity.
Yes.
Because if I'm heard and you have no choice but to open the door, or you're hearing to my voice, you'll hear my child's voice and their child's voice and their child's voice. So many times people are taken aback by the fact that I say this phrase, white people help white people.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a big shocker, right?
Right.
Other cultures, they will live together, fight together, work together, work for one another, right? I mean, just whatever it takes. And when we get rid of that competitiveness, when we see again that we all rise, when I am rising, we all rise when you are rising. My winning is not your losing, and your losing is my losing, not my winning.
Yes.
Right? When we see that, then we do something different. And we say, we have to build wealth. We have to build a legacy. Legacy is wealth. That legacy encompasses, yes, the capital, because capital opens door, answers questions. It answers questions. That's why there's a Morehouse and a Spelman and a Howard, because it answered a question that says, could they be educated? Should they be educated? Mm-hmm. They answered it with wealth. They answered it with money, right? And they answered it largely with the dollar that came from white people who believed they could do it. So when I think generational wealth, I think beyond my personal savings, which is imperative, and please save some money, Lord. We had this conversation. If you are honestly getting, stimulus dollars and child care tax advances, and you're not putting that aside and you're not using that to generate something for tomorrow, that's an affront, right? It's an affront. It's we have a responsibility to leave something. To let something not be responsive to my immediate need, but to my future responsibility. But wealth is so different in so many generations.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it means something different. And so we have to address all of it, and voice, access, and opportunity, open doors. I know so many people who have been so successful. It wasn't because they had the dollar. Someone gave them a referral, who gave a referral, who opened a door, who gave another reference, who gave a recommendation, who opened a door, right? Apprenticeship programs, upskilling, feeding into one another, honestly making connections that are genuine. I can't tell you how I really admire and adore Jennifer. Look at this door she opened, right? Not because she was asked to, because it was right to do. That's wealth building. We can't all say, I'm going to leave my children $1 million, right? But we can all say, I'm going to do everything in my power to create space and create room and open access and create opportunity.
To connect.
So that there's a legacy, so that perhaps our children, my children, the children that are coming, right, they don't have to fight as hard for that same opportunity.
Yes. And that's what I'm sitting here and thinking about as you talk, because even if nothing else, so that we're not starting or moving from a place of being in the hole, right? And I'm just reflecting on with my son, I shared he's 19, he's starting his third year of college, and 0 loans. We're not doing that. I'm not going to have him start with that.
I was going to try to find something to throw at you in a good,
Okay, we're not starting off with that. You know what I'm saying? So, I may not be able to, at this point, leave something that's going to impact his grandchildren. Not yet. I'm not there, but at least I can do something so that he's not saddled with that.
But you did do something that impacts his grandchildren.
Well, yeah.
You gave him a debt-free era in his life.
Yeah.
Right? Opens an opportunity that resource could be used someplace else. That's what I mean. That is straight legacy. True. Hey, let me get that. Where's my little clapper thing?
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Didn't I say yes.
All right. Whoop, whoop.
Yes. As I'm still paying school loans. Hallelujah. Yes. Those are important things. There's And if he doesn't know it today, the day
Yeah.
will come that he'll recognize what an extraordinary gift.
Yes.
And
And
what an
and it's
extraordinary
even
legacy.
with us, right? So I'm also, the wealth conversation is something that, that's the focus for August, and then September is a different focus. But I think we need to have this conversation every time, because we are so far behind when it comes to wealth. We are so uneducated about wealth, and we have a biblical relationship with it, right? So when you mentioned the saying that's on your wall, people were probably looking at that like, oh, you're lusting after money, the love of money and blah, blah, blah. But that's not it at all. And we have to have the conversations to get away from that and to be able to, exactly what you said, money is the answer to a lot, if not everything, right? It definitely is. What you said, the examples that you gave, if you don't have the money, you won't have those things.
That's right.
And so we have to reframe our relationship with money.
So something that we talk about with our children, when I was growing up, I will never forget, Reebok Classics came out. I'm telling my age, so severe, right? And at that time, they were probably $35, $40. That was a big deal in my house. Okay, you need a pair of sneakers for $40. What you gonna do? The sneaker gonna walk you to school?
Right.
It's not. What is it doing for you that this $10 pair of kids that we can go get is not doing? And then I grew up in a place where snow was prolific, and so this Reebok is not gonna make it in this 6 feet of snow while you walk to number 36 school every day. That's not helping you. So again, speaking about just how we look at wealth, you can take that money and invest in that brand, invest in that mark, invest in that markup, or you can take the difference and invest in tomorrow, right? Invest in a class, invest in an extracurricular activity, invest in a 401k, invest in a stock, invest in a bond, right? So these are things wealthy people, we don't tend to understand that what they show us is not necessarily what they're paying for. Right? What they show us externally, what they put on their social media, a lot of that is sponsored, and they're not paying for it, but they're paid to ask you to pay for it.
Right.
So they got paid to ask you to spend your money. And you go, well, since they have it, I want it. But they really didn't want it in the first place. And if they had it, they didn't pay for it. So then you go spend your money because you were influenced, right, by something you saw. But if we took the difference in that markup, because it had a logo or brand, or it was associated with some status symbol, if we took that markup and we invested in something different, who knows what we would produce for tomorrow? That's why I say, if I had write that Apple IIe way back, I'm holding that against some people right now today. You hear me?
Right.
But that's the difference.
Yeah.
We're so focused. You said something I hope everyone listening hears. We're not doing that. You won't leave school like that. You made a decision. There was something more significant than whether or not he had, I don't know, the car that was the most glorious on campus, or right. So you make a decision. Is the decision that before he goes to school, we have those Reebok Classics, or are you going to get these, these Pumas, and you're going to live, but you're not going to have school debt.
Right.
These are the conversations we don't like to have. And part of it is not about anyone seeing us. It's about us seeing us, because we've been so used to using brands as our voice.
Yes.
Our culture has become acclimated to using brands as our voice. And when we shed that pretense, which is really connected all to envy and pride, when we shed that, honey,
right,
billions of dollars of buying power, turn that thing inward. I'm not coming to get your stuff. I got my own. And when we finally get that.
Right. And then I'll add too, okay, with the brands, invest in it. Okay, you like those Reeboks? Buy some stock.
Listen.
Okay.
And get enough stock so you can vote.
Yes.
Right. So you can vote and it be heard. This exercise your voice.
Absolutely. That's another way.
That's right.
That's
Proxy,
another way.
coming in, let me, I don't want them on the board. I don't like this. And those shoes are ugly. Right.
Girl, listen. All right. So we are at the end. But before we say our goodbyes, what do you want to leave our audience with?
Oh man, I think I would just say first, listen, lean in and listen. We talk about leaning in, but when I say lean, I mean really put your elbows to your knees, lean in and listen. And as you're listening, keep asking, keep querying, keep digging, and really elevate the voices of the people who at this moment, in this season, in this hour, we should be centering our hearing on.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. J. This has been an awesome conversation. And yes, we're going to have a part 2. We can dig even, deeper into the conversation around wealth, because I definitely want to talk more about that, right? Because we don't know, girl. I was talking with the guest that I talked to on Monday, and she mentioned something about balancing a checkbook, and I thought about Denise in What a Different World, and on the payphone, and how she had, bounced all those checks because we didn't know to like, oh, well, I need to, and wait for it to, all of that clear and all of that type of stuff. And that's something simple, but there's so much more that we are not aware of, and that we need to tap into that. We need to start investing. We need to start paying attention to things, and how do we make money off of that thing? Oh, you want to play games? Okay, cool. Guess what? People getting paid. So let's figure out how we can get you paid sitting at that TV playing that game. So I definitely want to have more conversations, but I so thank you, Dr. J. Martinez, again, for lending your voice to this deep conversation, the glory of that, recognizing the rhythm, the thread, the thread that connects us. Girl, I don't know, I'm gonna have to really think about the title and the description on this one, but this has been some good stuff. Again, shout out to Jennifer Witter for connecting us, and for those, our audience, thank you for continuing to be coming back each week. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast or you're watching on YouTube, watch on YouTube. I so appreciate you, and my guests overseas, the UK, Germany, Ghana, wherever you are, Malaysia. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And until next time, I am your host, Deneen L. Garrett, and goodbye. Thank you.